Good morning, family. This is Ricky, and welcome to Hope for Today. I remember this Disney movie. I guess it's a Disney movie or Pixar, I don't remember, but it was about rats. It's called Ratatouille. And the movie builds up to this moment where this rat, who's a wannabe chef, gets to make this meal for this notorious French reviewer and food critic, right? It's this pregnant moment that everybody's kind of been building up towards. And the critic sits down at the table and says, they say, Mr. Critic, what would you like for dinner? And he says, give me perspective. And they were like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I want perspective. In other words, perspective of how to truly gauge your cooking talent. And I think I'm saying all that to say is that when we're going through struggle and strain and troubles and trials in our life, perspective can be the reason you make it through. Because let's call it what it is. When you got hardship, man, when you're struggling financially, struggling emotionally, sometimes the only thing that keeps you sane is perspective, to know that God has a plan on the other side of this thing. That's why James in the Bible, chapter 1, verse 2, says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. Now, again, this is a weird verse because I used to look at this verse when I was young and say, be joyful. When I go through trouble in my life, that don't even make any sense. James is not saying be joyful. He's saying count it joyful, which is the idea that God would only will what is good in my life. So even if what I'm going through is bad, God's will for me is good. So even though I'm not experiencing it as joyful, I can count it as joyful, because even when my conditions are not good, I know God's character still is. Who am I talking to today? Because you got a hardship, you got a trial, you got a tribulation, and your perspective right now is one of, man, if all this is happening, God must not be a fan. God don't like me. God don't have a good plan for me. But don't look at the conditions, look at the character. Look at the character of Christ to know that he is good and he wills nothing but good for me. He's not saying experience it as joyful. He's saying count it as joyful, because on the other side of this, there's hope. On the other side of this, there's strength. On the other side of this, there's an improvement in my character. On the other side of this, there's a lesson that I had to learn in trouble that I never was going to learn in wartime. Count it all joy. And sometimes that perspective is the difference between you turning your back on God or keeping your face towards God. Perspective, perspective, perspective. We're thinking about you if you're struggling today. We're concerned for you if you're struggling today. But know this, when you can't see his hand, you can still know his heart. God's got a good plan for you. And that's Hope for Today. I'll see you next time.